1 Samuel 20, 11 through 17. Jonathan replied to David, "Come, let us go into the field." So they both went out into the field. Jonathan said to David, "By the Lord, the God of Israel, when I have sounded out my father, about this time tomorrow or on the third day, if he is well disposed towards David, shall I not send and disclose it to you? But if my father intends to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away so that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father. If I'm still alive, show me the faithful love of the Lord, but if I die, never cut off your faithful love from my house, even if the Lord were to cut off every one of my enemies of David from the face of the earth." Thus Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord seek out the enemies of David." Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own life. Friends, we're continuing our series this week called All in the Family, where we're exploring family drama in Scripture. And this passage of Scripture finds itself in a much larger narrative between the characters of Saul and David in the Old Testament that actually takes up both 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. It's two books in the Bible. And a little bit of contextualization would be helpful for our conversation today. So we know that Saul was the first king of Israel. Before Saul reigned, Israel was under the ruleship of judges, and this is not long robes and gavels, this is like warrior tribal leaders. But the people clamored for a king. They saw how other cultures did it, and they begged God for a king, and finally God said, "Give the people what they want." And Saul was the first king to be anointed over the united Israel. And Saul reigned fairly well for a while. All evidence seems to point towards he was fairly successful and led Israel through some tumultuous times with great success. But he also had some help doing so. He had his son, Jonathan, who was another second command in his kingship. And he also had other help from generals and other warriors in the united Israel. And one of those generals was David. David, we may know from Scripture, eventually becomes the king of Israel, but he didn't start that way. He had much more modest beginnings. He was a shepherd boy, the youngest of his brothers, and by all accounts, undersized and kind of ruddy for his age. But he sort of becomes the underdog for all underdogs. We know the story well of David and Goliath, where the shepherd boy bests the giant. And sort of after that episode, David enjoys quite the success amongst the people and rises to fame and notoriety quite quickly and becomes eventually a general in King Saul's army. And he kept finding success over and over again, much to Saul's chagrin. We learn in the narrative throughout 1 and 2 Samuel that Saul had quite the jealous streak, and so he didn't like it when David was getting more praise than he was. And so Saul started doing this thing where he was sending David into battles that were more and more lopsided, harder to win, giving David less resources and sending him into more fierce battles. And yet somehow David kept prevailing. David kept winning, which was always counterproductive to Saul's bottom line because it made David even more popular. And so we find ourselves in this really tense moment where King Saul is actually seeking out the life of David. He's trying to kill him. He's trying to find him wherever David is hiding and extinguish his life to sort of get rid of his competition. But in the midst of this tension, this sort of unlikely friendship has been formed, and that's between David and King Saul's son, Jonathan. Jonathan, like many others in Israel, had sort of been drawn to the legend of David, been drawn to the allure and the popularity of David, and they actually became very close friends. Passage that we see in this scripture section that we read today is David and Jonathan sort of confiding in this really tense moment where David is fleeing for his life, and Jonathan is sort of giving him information about Saul's plans in order to save David's life. And so Jonathan is sort of going against the desires of his father, going against the desires of the king in order to save his friend. And it's really interesting to me because by all accounts, this is the most unlikely friendship. Jonathan is the son of the king and therefore the next rightful heir to the throne. David is rising in popularity, and some people are saying, well, why isn't David king? He's a better general, better fighter, better leader than Saul. And so David is also in this weird inline for the king. So really, David and Jonathan ought to be bitter rivals. It actually benefits Jonathan to have David out of the picture as well. But clearly there's been an affection formed, a respect, a mutual friendship between these two parties, so much so that Jonathan makes some really risky choices in this episode to save David's life. And I think that's really where we get the family drama piece for this week. I imagine that many of us haven't had the choice to make of, do we become the next king or do we honor the wills of our father? But we probably have had those choices that we've made that maybe go against our family of origin, what I would call our inherited values, those things that we've been brought up with, grown up with from our parents or from our extended family, sort of the values that we are taught. And then we also have our individual values, those things that are deeply formed in our own context, our own experiences, our own life circumstances. And sometimes our individual and our inherited values butt head to head. So what do we do when that happens? What do we do when we, like Jonathan, have to make a really difficult choice? Do we defy the will and the desire of our father, or do we stick up for our friend and save his life? Maybe it's not as intense as saving a life, but really what Jonathan is doing here is pursuing justice. Because in Jonathan's mind, he knows his father, and we get more evidence as the story goes on. Jonathan knows that Saul is acting out of jealousy, acting out of anger, acting out of competition, and that Jonathan knows, that David's life ought to be spared because David's really done no wrong. He's just kept being more successful while his father has tried to kill him. But Jonathan makes this choice. And my question for us this week is, how do we know where that line is? How do we know when it is our individual values or our inherited values that we ought to pursue? Like I said, we've probably never found ourselves in the same exact circumstances as Jonathan, but I would presume that there's been times in all of our lives where we have to make that discernment decision about what values are we going to pursue in this moment. And it might upset our family of origin. It might go against what we were taught growing up, but we know that it's right in the pursuit of justice. After this scene in 1 Samuel, Jonathan finds himself at a dinner with his father, Saul, and David had been invited, and there is a moment where Saul's anger bubbles up and bubbles over, and he says, "Where is David?" And Jonathan says, like they had promised in the field, "Oh, he talked to me, he had to go on to Bethlehem." He again sticks up for his friend David in defiance of his father. Maybe you won't find yourself at the royal table anytime soon, but I imagine you might find yourself around a Thanksgiving table, or a table at a meal, or a gathering at a holiday session where some of those intense conversations may happen. And if that's you, and if you're feeling anxiety about that, or feeling unsure about, what do I say in that moment? What do I do in that moment? May we take courage from this story in 1 Samuel to know that sometimes God's discernment is made clear as it was made clear to Jonathan. The hard part, friends, is there's no magic pill. There's no prescriptive reality that you can read or get from one Bible story or even all the Bible stories to tell you exactly what to do in that moment. But may you pray to God for wisdom. Something that's really powerful to me about Jonathan's decision to stick up for David is also his connection to his family of origin. He doesn't completely dismiss Saul and all of the rage and animosity. He stays with his father and sort of tends to both sides of this argument. He definitely makes plans with David, but he also goes and shows up to dinner and kind of confronts his father in that way. Now, friends, I'm not saying that the best way forward is always confrontation. I think there are times that you will know in love and compassion when to speak up, and there are times that we may need to, in the name of self-preservation, walk away and not go there. But if you ever feel like you're drawn to go there and you don't know how to go there, may we take courage from this story in 1 Samuel. Friends, this is difficult work. And it's been difficult work from 1 Samuel all the way to our current reality. And the only way that we'll move forward, the only way that we can find that wisdom is to pray for God's Spirit to be with us, to pray for discernment, to pray for understanding and compassion and love and grace. May you pray for those things if you're in that space. May we find those things around the tables that we sit at in the days to come. And may we remember that no matter what, in those difficult decisions, in those moments where it feels so hard to step out in courage, that God is with us. And that's good news.
I've lost my appetite, and a flood is welling up behind my eyes. So I eat the tears I cry. And if that were not enough, they know just the words to cut and tear and prod when they ask me, where's your God? Why are you downcast, oh my soul? Why so disturbed within me? I can remember when you showed your face to me. As a deer pants for water, so my soul thirsts for you. And when I behold your glory, you so faithfully renew, like a bed of rest for my fainting flesh. I am satisfied in you. When I'm staring at the ground, it's an inbred feedback loop that brings me down. So it's time to lift my brow and remember better days when I love to worship you in all your ways with the sweetest songs of praise. Why are you downcast, oh my soul? Why so disturbed within me? I can remember when you showed your grace to me. As a deer pants for water, so my soul thirsts for you. And when I survey your splendor, you so faithfully renew, like a bed of rest for my fainting flesh. I am satisfied in you. Let my sighs give way to songs that sing about your faithfulness. Let my pain reveal your glory as my only real rest. Let my losses show me all I truly have is you. 'Cause all I truly have is you. So when I'm drowning out at sea, and your breakers and your waves crash down on me, I'll recall your safety scheme. You're the one who made the waves, and your son went out to suffer in my place, and to tell me that I'm safe. So why am I down? Why so disturbed? I am satisfied in you. I am satisfied in you. I am satisfied in you. satisfied in you. I am satisfied in you.